Evening YouTube. So it's another night in for me tonight. James is already here. He's been round here all afternoon because I had a bit of a result today and finished work early. James was off today, so I picked him up on the way home. We grabbed some beers and then came back here, and we've just been chilling out all afternoon. So we've been playing a load of different music through this little setup I've got on the table. We've been on the computer looking at what is for sale on there, because James is thinking about buying himself a new receiver. Well, not a new receiver, a vintage receiver. So we've been on the computer having a look at what's for sale this week, see if there is any good bargains on there. And we did find a few things, so I've clicked a few things in my watch list, and James found a few things that he liked the look of, so he clicked a few into the watch list on his phone. So I'll just turn the Pioneer back on. So we're doing the Pioneer SX434 receiver today with these vintage Kef Kantar 2 speakers on it. So I'll just go to my CD player and push play. And also, when we was looking on the computer earlier, we had a look on Gumtree, and on there was a set of Rogers LS55 speakers with a tweeter not working. And they was really local to me, and they looked in really nice condition. So I have messaged the person and asked if I can go and have a look at them, but they haven't got back to me yet. But hopefully they will, and then I'll go and have a look at a set of Rogers LS55 floor standers. And if they are as good as they look in the photos, I might even buy them. So hopefully the person will get back to me and they are still for sale. Because I think even if they need a new tweeter put in them, it won't be hard to find a tweeter for them Rogers, because them LS55s are not really that old, so I think you'd quite easy find a new tweeter for them. And I bet if you can get them Rogers back working properly again, they will be a really nice sounding set of floor standing speakers. Well, for the price, because they are not listed on Gumtree for much money. So all this week I've had this little Pioneer SX434 running with these Kef speakers on it. So that's what I've been listening to all week. And these speakers this week on this Pioneer have sounded like a totally different set of speakers to what they did the week before. Because the week before I was running them on this Sansui 310 receiver. So I was listening to them on that Sansui for a week. And then I've had a week with listening to them on the Pioneer. And I am getting a very different sound out of them on this Pioneer compared to the sound I was getting the other week out of them on this Sansui 310 receiver. So this week, listening to them on this Pioneer, it's hard to believe that I was listening to the same set of speakers as I was last week on the Sansui. Because on that Sansui receiver last week, these Kefs really sounded like a nice old pair of vintage speakers. They had that vintage sound going on. I was getting a load of really good bass out of them. I was getting a really nice top end out of them. But it was all a little bit laid back and really smoothed off, because that's what this Sansui does. This Sansui is really smooth. And I was getting a load of bass out of them last week, because the Sansui does exaggerate the bass a little bit. That's what it does. So I was getting a load of bass, and it was that really nice, luxurious, deep bass. so I was getting a load of that. But it was quite laid back and really smoothed out. So I was under the impression that the characteristics of these speakers were a little bit laid back, because that was the sound I was getting from the Sansui. And I really was getting a nice detailed top end out of these speakers on the Sansui. And when I was playing stuff with like female vocals going on, yeah, I was getting a really good sound out of these speakers. The vintage sound, a really good vintage sound I was getting out of these last week. So then this week I've connected them up to the Pioneer, and when I first did it the other day, I was really surprised by how different these speakers sound on this little Pioneer 434, because straight away I was noticing that these Kevs were no longer sounding like a vintage set of speakers. They had lost all that smoothed out, laid back sound that I was getting out of them before, and the characteristics of them had totally changed. So suddenly, these Kevs are as fast as anything on this Pioneer. They sound like a modern set of speakers. They've got that speed going on, and they have gone really lively and very punchy, and everything is happening really fast on them. So the way these speakers sound on this Pioneer is totally different to how they sounded on that Sansui. And although I was no longer getting that really deep, luxurious vintage bass that I was getting, on this Pioneer I was now getting really fast and lively bass that was really punchy and still nice and deep as well. So I'm still getting really enjoyable bass, but it is just very different from the bass that I was getting with the Sansui. So it'd be interesting to see what that Pioneer SX434 does with these Kefs. Because that Pioneer, that one sitting at the bottom there, I got that for Christmas from my missus, and it was only working on one channel. But I've been right through it this week. I've done a few videos on it that I've put on my other channel, and now that Pioneer SX434 is now working. So I should be doing things with that one soon on the channel. I haven't really done anything with it yet. I've not put it through its paces or anything like that. All I've done with it so far is had it connected up to a little set of Mission speakers, and I've had my CD player plugged into it, and I've just played it for about an hour at low volumes just to let it warm up properly and just to see how it was working. And so far it does seem to be working fine, which is good. So it gives us another nice old vintage receiver to play around with and test out on the channel. And that Pioneer SX434 has got a lot more power than this 434, because this 434 is only 15 watts per channel, so it's not very powerful, this little Pioneer. But believe me, this little Pioneer seems more powerful than 15 watts. And it has got plenty of power to drive these Kefs. These Kefs are rated at 50 watts, but this little Pioneer drives them really well. And it really is pushing some good bass through that B200 driver. And it really has made that driver sound a lot more lively than it did on the Sansui. And when I'm playing tracks that have got a lot of drums in them, the drums seem to be coming at you with a lot more attack, and they really have got a lot more punch behind them. and I am going to give it to the tweeter on these Kefs. That T33 tweeter is a really nice sounding tweeter, because I said it on the Sansui. I said that this tweeter had that Sansui's top end sounding the best I have heard it. And that is also the case with these Kefs on this Pioneer. I do think again this is the best top end that I've had out of this Pioneer so far. I'm saying so far because I haven't really had that many speakers on this Pioneer yet. So as the channel grows and I get more and more speakers to try out on it, I probably will find something that sounds better on this Pioneer than these Kefs do, because these Kefs are not a lot of money worth of speakers. You have to look at them like that. They are only a cheap set of speakers. Now, they're not dirt cheap, but they're not very expensive for what you are getting, considering you are getting a pair of Kefs with that B200 driver in them and a nice T33 tweeter. Then these are a bit of a bargain, really. So hopefully, as time goes on, we should be able to find a set of speakers that sound better on this Pioneer. But at the moment, these Kefs are the best sounding I've had this little SX434. Not so much in the bass, because I have had the bass sounding really good on this with other speakers. But it is in the top end. The top end on these Kefs really is the best sounding top end I've had out of this little Pioneer. And it is because of that tweeter. That T33 tweeter really is doing a good job taming the top end a little bit on this Pioneer. Because on some other speakers I have had on it, although I can get a really nice sounding bass out of them, the top end can tend to get a little bit shouty and a little bit harsh and screechy on some songs. But with these T33s, it is not doing that. I have not had no screechiness or harshness at all out of these Kefs. So that T33 tweeter really works well with this Pioneer. And that did come as a little bit of a surprise, because when I first put these speakers on this receiver, I did sort of think that it wouldn't work out that well, because it is very lively, this Pioneer, and it does tend to get a little bit bright sometimes, this Pioneer. So I thought when I put these Kefs on it, it might make the top end of these Kefs a little bit harsh and screechy sometimes, like this Pioneer does with other speakers. So it really was a nice surprise to find out that it just doesn't do that. So earlier, when me and James first got back here, the first CD that I put in was Prodigy, Fat of the Land album, because we had that last week through these Kefs on the Sansui. So I put that straight in and we sat down to listen to that. And I did have it turned up quite loud, because you have to have Prodigy loud, and it's one of them types of music that you just have to crank it up a little bit. So after the CD had finished, I said to James, what do you think sounded better? What did you like more? This album on this Pioneer or this album on the Sansui? And he went, oh, the Sansui was like last week. I can't remember that well. I went, right, let's put the Sansui back on. So that's what I did. I connected the Sansui back up, and then we had a few tracks off the album through the Sansui, and then I put the Pioneer back on and we had the same couple of tracks again. And we was both talking about it and just saying how different it sounded on this Pioneer compared to that Sansui. Really is different. On the Sansui, you're getting a load of bass and you kind of focus on that bass because it sounds so good. But on this Pioneer, it's like all happening fast and it's like really lively. So you are not just sitting there focusing on the bass, you are kind of listening to everything. So then, after we had had our little blast of Prodigy, I asked James again. I went, right, what do you like best? Sansui and Kefs or Pioneer and Kefs? And his answer was both. He said he loves the sound of the bass on the Sansui, but then he loves the amount of attack that that little Pioneer puts across. And then he said, so can I ask a favour? So I went, yeah, go on then. He went, right, you're not going to be using that Pioneer next week, are ya? So I said, no, probably not. He went, well, can I take it home, please? Can I have the Pioneer for a week so I can try it out indoors on my speakers? So of course I said yes, but then I also said, well, that must prove that you liked the Pioneer more than the Sansui because you never asked to borrow the Sansui. And he went, no, not yet I haven't, but what I was thinking is, if I take the Pioneer home next week and bring it back at the weekend, then maybe the week after you'd let me take the Sansui home. So that sums it up pretty well, really, because although these two receivers with these Kefs sound very different, they are both really enjoyable and both sound really good. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time.